I can retire in my early 40s without investing another dollar and without sacrificing the luxuries that are important to me. That's 20 years before the retirement age, and that's the power of compound growth. Welcome back to my channel where we're building wealth to live life on our own terms, one money move at a time. Today I'm sharing how you can figure out when you can become work optional and steps to take if you're not on track to get there. If you're ready to take control of your financial future, you're in the right place. I'm Rami, a real estate investor sharing all of my tips to fast track your way to financial freedom without sacrificing the luxuries that are important to you along the way. So let's get into it. So yes, my husband and I are on track to retire in our early 40s, which is incredible. What's even more great is we don't have to live a bare bones lifestyle to get there, even though we live in a semi-high cost of living area. The traditional path to financial independence is cutting expenses as much as possible. That means no fancy car, no new house, no luxury vacations. And I respect people that can do it that way, but personally I feel like life is too short. So our approach takes us a little bit longer, but it leaves room for the luxuries that we care about along the way. We likely won't retire in a traditional sense, but the important thing is that we'll be able to choose how we spend our time. When I was little, my mom went part-time at work, which meant that she could come and read to my class or go on field trips with me. I remember when she'd walk into the classroom, I would beam with pride. I was so excited and proud that she got to do these activities with me. I want that same opportunity. I just had a baby a few months ago, and I dream of the time where I can do the same for her. So my why is more time with the people that are most important to me, giving them a refreshed and present version of me versus what's left at the end of a demanding workday. Knowing your why is so important because it makes the journey more meaningful. So step one is calculate your FIRE number. FIRE stands for financial independence, retire early. You have to figure out the total amount of money that you have to have invested on day one of retirement. A reliable way to do this is by using the 4% rule. This is a rule of thumb that says that you can safely withdraw 4% of the total amount that you have invested year one of retirement, and then that dollar amount plus or minus inflation for every year afterwards. I highly encourage you to dig into the Trinity study that I've linked to this video to understand the methodology more. But 4% is the magic number based on average market returns and the ability to make your money last for at least 30 years. So you get your FIRE number by taking your total annual expenses divided by 4%. But there are some things to keep in mind. A lot of early retirees use 4% as their safe withdrawal rate, meaning the amount that you can safely withdraw from the total amount that you have invested. But remember, this is meant to last you around 30 years. People who want to retire early should actually use a lower safe withdrawal rate. This will help extend the life of your portfolio. If retirement will last between 40 and 60 years, like in my case, you'll want to use 3.5% as your safe withdrawal rate. And don't just think about what your expenses are today. Think about what your expenses will look like at the age you plan to retire. So first, bake in new expenses. For example, consider healthcare costs. My husband and I get our healthcare paid for largely through work, but obviously when we retire, we'd have to pay for it ourselves. So we added $1,500 a month, the average cost of healthcare for a family of 4, as a new expense during retirement. Consider travel costs. How much or how little will you plan to travel every year during retirement? Your kids' education. Right now, we have one child, so that means just one 529 account, but we baked in additional 529 accounts based on potentially having more children. And then finally, taxes. Your tax rate will likely be lower in retirement, but it's still important to consider what that could look like. You also want to remove expenses that you won't need. Right now, we have a baby, which means that we're paying for daycare, but that won't be the case in 10 years when we plan to retire. Our mortgage will also be paid off at a certain point. So we removed our principal and interest payments from the back half of our retirement. Considering things like this will give you a more accurate picture of what your expenses will actually look like. Step 2 is calculating the future value of your current investments. Whatever the balance is on these accounts, we want to figure out how much they'll be worth at our desired retirement age. The good thing is you can feed a lot of this information into ChatGPT and it'll do all the heavy lifting. A good rule of thumb is to use 8% for stocks, which takes into account inflation, and 3% for real estate, which is the national average. So let's say you have $250,000 invested in stocks and you want to retire in 10 years. Our ChatGPT prompt would be, how much will $250,000 be worth in 10 years at a growth rate of 8%? Obviously, you'll plug in the numbers that are applicable to your situation. Now, in this scenario, we're acting like we're not contributing another dime. We're trying to get the roughest picture of what it looks like to retire by our desired age. If there's a shortage, you can play around with different scenarios where you continue to invest more money. So in our example, you have $250,000 invested, you want to retire in 10 years, but let's say you know that you can comfortably contribute $500 a month. So our new ChatGPT prompt will be, how much will $250,000 be worth in 10 years at an 8% growth rate and with a monthly contribution of $500? Let's look at a case study that puts this in action. So let's say Bob is 30 and his FIRE number is $1 million, meaning he needs $1 million on day one of retirement. He wants to retire by 40 and he currently has $250,000 invested in the stock market. If we use an 8% growth rate, Bob will have around $554,000 when he wants to retire in 10 years. And that's without investing another dime. But we know that he needs $1 million. If he can find a way to invest an additional $2,500 a month, he can retire at 40 with $1 million. If he can only invest $500 a month, he'll hit that million mark around 45. So he'll either have to increase how much he's investing or be more realistic about the age at which he can retire. When you're thinking about your investments, there are a couple things to consider. Number one, don't include your primary residence unless you plan to sell it and invest the gains. It's not an investment since you can't live off the equity without giving up your housing. Number two, if you have rental properties, you'll need to make assumptions about what you're going to do with them. Will you factor the cash flow into your income or sell those properties and use the equity as part of your overall retirement fund? A big assumption that I made is that I'll likely sell my properties at retirement age and invest that equity into the market where I'll likely see better returns at that time. And lastly, if most of your wealth is in your 401k, be advised that there are typically penalties to withdraw before 59 and a half. So you want to consider that as well. If you're projected to be far off from your number, don't sweat it. There are a couple things that you can do to accelerate your investing. Number one is find a way to increase your income. I'm a huge advocate for finding a side hustle and investing all of the money that you make. Number two is invest large sums. Instead of making big purchases when you get your bonus or your tax return, invest that money instead. We just put my bonus into our money market account and found that that shaves off 6 months on our journey to retirement. That's the power of compound growth. And lastly, organize and optimize. Know your numbers really well and know how your money is allocated, and then be willing to adjust as necessary to hit your goals. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments other ways that you're accelerating your investing. Don't forget to subscribe and stay financially fabulous.